What happens when America's sweetheart finally reaches her breaking point on live television? Tonight, we're diving deep into one of the most explosive celebrity interviews ever captured on camera, where Jennifer Aniston completely lost it on Jimmy Kimmel in front of millions of viewers. This isn't your typical Hollywood drama. This is raw, unfiltered fury that left the audience stunned, and Kimmel scrambling to regain control of his own show. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds here. The atmosphere at the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was electric that Tuesday evening. Jennifer Aniston had arrived to promote her latest project, but what seemed like a routine publicity appearance was about to turn into television history. The audience was buzzing with excitement, completely unaware they were about to witness one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night talk show history. As the cameras rolled and Kimmel's signature theme music faded, he flashed that familiar grin toward his guest. Jennifer sat poised in the guest chair, looking every bit the seasoned professional she'd always been. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her smile was camera-ready, and she appeared relaxed as she settled into what everyone assumed would be another charming celebrity chat. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the absolutely stunning Jennifer Aniston," Kimmel announced with his usual theatrical flair. The audience erupted in applause as Jennifer waved graciously, that megawatt smile lighting up the studio. "Jennifer, thank you so much for being here tonight. You look absolutely radiant," Kimmel said, leaning back in his chair with what appeared to be genuine warmth. "Thank you, Jimmy. It's always a pleasure to be here," Jennifer replied, her voice carrying that familiar, warm tone that had endeared her to millions of fans worldwide. But something felt different tonight. Those who knew Jennifer well might have noticed a slight tension in her shoulders, a microscopic tightness around her eyes that suggested she wasn't quite as relaxed as she appeared. Kimmel, however, seemed oblivious to any undercurrents as he dove into his first question. "So Jennifer, I have to ask about something that's been making headlines lately. There have been some pretty wild rumors circulating about your personal life, and I thought maybe we could set the record straight," Kimmel said, his tone taking on a slightly more serious edge. Jennifer's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "What rumors would those be, Jimmy?" "Well, you know how the tabloids are. They're saying all sorts of things about your relationships, your supposed feuds with other actresses, even some pretty personal stuff about your family life. I figured you might want to address some of these stories directly." The studio audience leaned forward slightly, sensing that this wasn't going to be the typical lighthearted banter they were used to from these interviews. Jennifer's posture straightened almost imperceptibly. "Jimmy, I thought we agreed beforehand that we weren't going to discuss my personal life tonight. I'm here to talk about my work, not to feed the gossip mill." Kimmel chuckled, but there was something almost predatory about it. "Oh, come on, Jennifer. Your fans want to know the real you. They want to know what's really going on behind the scenes. Surely you can give us just a little something." "Actually, no, I can't," Jennifer replied, her voice remaining steady but taking on a firmer tone. "And I won't. We had an agreement, Jimmy, and I expect you to honor it." The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. Audience members began shifting in their seats, and the camera operators seemed uncertain where to focus. Kimmel, however, pressed forward with what appeared to be complete disregard for his guest's obvious discomfort. "But Jennifer, these stories are already out there. People are talking about them anyway. Wouldn't it be better to get ahead of them and tell your side of the story? I mean, some of these rumors are pretty damaging to your reputation." Jennifer's eyes flashed with the first real sign of anger. "My reputation has been built over decades of hard work and professionalism, Jimmy. I don't need to defend it against tabloid nonsense, especially not on a talk show that's supposed to be promoting my latest project." "Right, but see, here's the thing," Kimmel continued, seemingly immune to the warning signs that were becoming increasingly obvious to everyone else in the studio. "Your latest project isn't exactly getting rave reviews, is it? Some critics are saying it's your worst work in years. Maybe talking about your personal life might actually help people connect with you more, humanize you a bit." The studio fell silent except for the faint hum of the cameras. Jennifer stared at Kimmel for a long moment, her famous composure beginning to crack around the edges. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. Kimmel, apparently mistaking her quietness for acquiescence, leaned forward with renewed confidence. "Look, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Your career has had its ups and downs lately, and maybe being more open about your personal struggles could actually help your image. I mean, vulnerability is very in right now. Jennifer's hands gripped the arms of her chair, and those who knew her well would have recognized this as a clear danger sign. But Kimmel wasn't done. Plus, there's this whole thing about you supposedly being difficult to work with. Multiple sources have told me that you've been pretty demanding on set lately, maybe even a little diva-like. Care to comment on that? The studio audience gasped audibly. Several crew members behind the cameras exchanged worried glances. This had clearly gone beyond the bounds of acceptable interview behavior, even by late-night television standards. Jennifer took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was ice cold. Jimmy, I want you to listen to me very carefully. We had a pre-interview agreement about what topics were off-limits tonight. You've now violated that agreement multiple times, despite my clear requests for you to stop. You've insulted my work, questioned my professionalism, and repeated unsubstantiated gossip as if it were fact. I'm giving you one last chance to steer this conversation back to appropriate territory. But Kimmel, perhaps emboldened by what he perceived as good television, decided to double down instead of backing off. You know what, Jennifer? Maybe the sources are right. Maybe you are difficult to work with. I mean, you're being pretty difficult right now, and we're just having a conversation, Kimmel said with a smirk that would soon be wiped clean off his face. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The studio audience collectively held its breath, and even the band members behind their instruments seemed frozen in anticipation of what was about to unfold. Jennifer's face transformed completely. The practiced Hollywood smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unbridled fury that nobody in that studio had ever seen before. When she spoke, her voice cut through the silence like a blade. Difficult? You want to know what difficult is, Jimmy? Jennifer stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward with enough force to bump into the backdrop. Difficult is sitting here listening to you ambush me on live television after we specifically agreed on boundaries. Difficult is watching you try to humiliate me for cheap ratings while I'm supposed to smile and play along like some trained seal. Kimmel's confident expression began to falter as he realized this wasn't going according to any script he'd imagined. Jennifer, I think you're overreacting here. We're just having a conversation. Overreacting? Jennifer's voice rose several octaves, and the microphone on her lapel picked up every nuance of her escalating anger. You call ambushing your guest with tabloid garbage and personal attacks just having a conversation? You call breaking your word and violating our agreement just talking? The camera operators were frantically switching between shots, unsure whether they should be capturing this meltdown or cutting away to commercial. The show's producers in the control booth were probably having minor heart attacks as they watched their carefully planned interview spiral completely out of control. Look, Jennifer, maybe we should take a breath here and... Kimmel started, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. No, Jimmy, you don't get to take a breath now. You wanted to dig into my personal life? Let's talk about your personal life. Let's talk about how you built your career on making fun of people who can't fight back. Let's talk about your reputation in this industry, because I guarantee you mine is a hell of a lot better than yours. The audience was completely silent now, torn between wanting to watch this incredible drama unfold and feeling deeply uncomfortable about witnessing such a raw, unfiltered moment. Some audience members had their phones out, clearly recording what they sensed was television history in the making. Kimmel tried to regain control, his voice taking on a forced calm that fooled absolutely nobody. Jennifer, I understand you're upset, but we're live on television here. Maybe we should discuss this privately during the commercial break. Privately? Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it whatsoever. You mean like how we privately discussed what topics were off-limits before this interview? You mean like how you privately assured my publicist that this would be a respectful, professional conversation about my work? That kind of privately, Jimmy? She took a step closer to his desk, her entire body radiating anger. You know what your problem is? You think because you're the host, because this is your show, you can treat your guests however you want. You think you can say whatever you want and hide behind the excuse that it's just entertainment. Jennifer, please, let's just calm down and... Kimmel attempted again. But Jennifer cut him off with a gesture that left no room for interruption. I am calm, Jimmy. This is me being calm. You want to see me not calm? Keep talking. Her voice had dropped to a menacing whisper that somehow carried more threat than any shouting could have managed. The band leader was making subtle hand signals to his musicians, clearly trying to prepare for an emergency commercial break or outro music, but nobody seemed willing to make the call to cut away from what was happening. 25 years I've been in this business, Jimmy. 25 years of dealing with people like you who think they can tear down women in entertainment for sport. I've sat through interviews where hosts made inappropriate comments about my body, where they asked invasive questions about my personal relationships, where they tried to pit me against other actresses for their own entertainment. Her voice began to rise again, building towards something that felt like it might shake the very foundations of the studio. And every single time I smiled and deflected and played the good sport, because that's what women in this industry are expected to do. We're expected to take it with grace, to laugh off the insults, to make the men who are attacking us feel comfortable about their behavior. Kimmel was visibly sweating now, his usual confidence completely evaporated. Jennifer, I never meant to attack you. I was just trying to do my job. Your job? The words exploded out of her with such force that several audience members actually flinched. Your job is to ambush your guests? Your job is to make people uncomfortable on live television? Your job is to break agreements and behave like a complete unprofessional jackass? She moved even closer to his desk, her hands pressed flat against the surface as she leaned toward him. Let me tell you what your job actually is, Jimmy. Your job is to make your guests feel welcome. Your job is to help them promote their work in a comfortable, respectful environment. Your job is to entertain your audience without destroying people in the process. The entire studio was transfixed. Even the crew members who had worked on hundreds of episodes of the show had never seen anything like this. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a planned bit. This was genuine, raw, human emotion exploding across their stage. And you know what else, Jimmy? Your job is certainly not to psychoanalyze me or my career choices based on gossip you've heard from unnamed sources. Who are these sources, by the way? Because I'd love to know who's been spreading lies about me being difficult to work with. Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, but Jennifer wasn't finished. Oh wait, you can't tell me, can you? Because they probably don't exist. Because you probably made that up on the spot to try to get a reaction out of me. Well, congratulations, Jimmy, you got your reaction. How's it working out for you so far? The silence that followed was deafening. Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, looking like a man who had just realized he'd stepped on a landmine and was afraid to move. The audience was completely still, afraid that any sound might shatter the electric tension that had taken over the entire studio. Jennifer straightened up, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths, as she stared down at the host who had so thoroughly underestimated her. I want you to know something, Jimmy. Every woman watching this tonight has been in a situation like this. Every woman has sat across from some man who thought he could bulldoze over her boundaries and then act surprised when she finally pushed back. Every woman has been called difficult or demanding or a diva simply for standing up for herself and demanding basic respect. Her voice carried across the studio with crystal clarity, and it was clear that she was no longer speaking just to Kimmel, but to every person watching. So thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for giving me the perfect opportunity to show every young woman out there exactly how to handle a bully who thinks he can hide behind a desk and a microphone. Thank you for demonstrating so perfectly why women in this industry have to fight twice as hard for half the respect. Kimmel finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. Jennifer, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. The look Jennifer gave him could have melted steel. A misunderstanding? Jennifer's voice was deadly quiet, each word dripping with contempt. Jimmy, the only misunderstanding here is yours. You misunderstood who you were dealing with tonight. You misunderstood what kind of woman sits in this chair. And you catastrophically misunderstood what the consequences would be for your behavior. The camera caught every micro-expression on Kimmel's face as the full weight of his situation began to dawn on him. His usual quick wit had completely abandoned him, leaving him looking like a deer caught in headlights. I think what I meant was, he stammered, but Jennifer held up a single finger that stopped him cold. No, Jimmy, you don't get to clarify or walk anything back now. You said exactly what you meant to say. You planned this ambush, you deliberately violated our agreement, and you thought you could get away with it because you assumed I would just sit here and take it like a good little Hollywood actress. She began to pace slightly, her energy too intense to remain stationary. The audience followed her every movement, completely mesmerized by this display of raw authenticity they had never witnessed on a talk show before. You want to know what's really difficult, Jimmy? What's really difficult is building a career in an industry that constantly tries to tear you down. What's difficult is maintaining your dignity when people like you think they can use you for cheap entertainment. What's difficult is sitting in rooms full of men who think your boundaries are suggestions rather than requirements. Kimmel made another feeble attempt to interject. Jennifer, if I could just explain. Explain what? She snapped, whirling to face him directly. Explain how you thought it would be funny to blindside me with gossip and lies? Explain how you decided to turn what should have been a professional interview into your personal roast of Jennifer Aniston. Please, Jimmy, I'm dying to hear your explanation. The sarcasm in her voice was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Several audience members were now openly staring at Kimmel with expressions that ranged from disappointment to outright disgust. Look, I was just trying to ask the questions that people want answered, Kimmel said weakly, his voice barely audible. No, you weren't, Jennifer shot back immediately. You were trying to create a viral moment at my expense. You were trying to manufacture drama because you thought it would get more views and more clicks. You turned me into content, Jimmy, and that's exactly the kind of toxic behavior that needs to stop in this industry. She moved back toward her chair but remained standing, her posture radiating power and control. You know what people actually want? They want authenticity. They want real conversations about real work. They want to hear about creativity and collaboration and the actual craft of making entertainment. But you couldn't be bothered with any of that, could you? Kimmel's face was now flushed red. Whether from embarrassment or anger, it was impossible to tell. I've been doing this show for years, Jennifer. I know what makes good television. Good television? Jennifer's laugh was sharp and bitter. You think this is good television? You think ambushing your guests and breaking their trust makes good television? Let me tell you what this is, Jimmy. This is lazy television. This is cowardly television. This is the kind of television that gets made when hosts would rather take cheap shots than do the actual work of having interesting conversations. The studio audience was beginning to turn. What had started as shocked silence was evolving into something that felt much more like support for Jennifer and disapproval of their host. A few people were even nodding along with her words. I've been on hundreds of talk shows, Jimmy. Hundreds. And the best hosts, the ones who really understand their craft, they make their guests feel comfortable and safe. They ask thoughtful questions. They listen to the answers. They treat their guests like human beings, rather than content to be consumed. She leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on an almost educational tone. Those hosts understand that their job is to facilitate genuine connection between their guests and the audience. They know that real entertainment comes from authentic moments, not manufactured controversy. Kimmel tried once more to salvage the situation. I really didn't mean for this to go this way. I was just trying to have some fun. Fun? The word came out like a gunshot. Fun for who, Jimmy? Because I can guarantee you this hasn't been fun for me. And judging by the looks on your audience's faces, it hasn't been particularly fun for them either. The only person who thought this would be fun was you, and that should tell you everything you need to know about your judgment. She began moving toward the edge of the stage, clearly preparing to leave. You know what would have been fun, Jimmy? Talking about the incredible cast I got to work with on my latest project. Discussing the amazing locations we filmed in. Sharing stories about the collaborative process of bringing a character to life. But you threw all of that away because you thought gotcha journalism would be more entertaining. The desperation was now clear in Kimmel's voice. Jennifer, please don't leave like this. We can start over. We can talk about your project. Jennifer stopped and turned back to face him one final time. Start over? Jimmy? There is no starting over from this. You've shown your true colors tonight. And they're not pretty. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of toxic behavior that women in this industry have been fighting against for decades. Her voice carried across the studio with absolute authority. And here's what's going to happen now. I'm going to walk off this stage with my dignity intact. I'm going to continue making the work that I believe in with people who respect me and treat me professionally. And you're going to have to explain to your producers, your network, and your audience Why you chose to destroy what should have been a perfectly pleasant interview. She took a few steps toward the stage exit, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Jimmy? Next time you want to ambush someone on live television, maybe pick someone who doesn't have 25 years of experience dealing with bullies exactly like you. The silence that followed was profound. Kimmel sat behind his desk looking absolutely devastated, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had done. The audience was completely still, processing what they had just witnessed. You know what the really sad part is? Jennifer said, her voice now carrying a note of genuine disappointment rather than anger. I actually used to respect you as a comedian and as a host. I thought you were better than this. I thought you understood that being funny doesn't require being cruel, that being entertaining doesn't require being destructive. She shook her head slowly. But I guess I was wrong about you, Jimmy.